Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. In this episode, we have got a back-to-back Bears victory Sunday. We've got Cubs showing that they belong in the MLB World Series playoffs, and Blackhawks red hot in their season premiere. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I want to mention our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. The season is underway. The Rockford Ice Hogs are in their regular season, so don't miss out. Try to hit up a game. Go to icehogs.com. Get to see the Blackhawk Stars of tomorrow, today. Only 90 minutes from the city limits, and fun for the whole family because A, it's a small, intimate atmosphere. B, a lot of cool things to do that are family friendly. And C, it's affordable. For what you could spend going by yourself to a Blackhawks game, you could probably bring a family of 4. So definitely check out the Ice Hogs. They're going to be fantastic again this year. And you get to see a lot of the upcoming Blackhawks players. So go to icehogs.com and check them out. Only 90 minutes from the city limits. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. So let's jump right into Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears. Bear down, Chicago Bears. All right. We've got another victory, and this one is one we snatched from the jaws of defeat. It felt good. And I feel like I was like a reverse jinx on this one, because on Twitter I posted the Bears need to triple their point total in 3 minutes 44 seconds. I'm not going to hold my breath. And lo and behold, they tripled their score and got that victory, which is fantastic. So let's jump right in here. Jay Cutler looked fantastic. I mean, granted, the secondary and for the Chiefs isn't that great. He's still recovering from that torn hamstring, and he has no wide receivers. I mean, I like Marquise Wilson and all, but when he's your number 1 receiver and Josh Bellamy is your number 2 receiver, that doesn't bode well for you, regardless of how bad the pass defense for the Kansas City Chiefs is. So you got to give it to Jay Cutler. He made do, and Adam Gase put a good game plan together, and they really did some interesting things in there. You already have a banged up offensive line, so they're not communicating well. You have a lot of penalties, and you're missing wide receivers, and you've got a quarterback that's hobbled. That doesn't add up well for being able to put up a lot of points. It doesn't look good for a team that is struggling, especially they are on the road. And after that first touchdown by Kansas City, where Grasu just got run over and 2 guys took Jay Cutler down, he fumbled. I don't really put that on Jay. If you watch, he's trying to tuck the ball in. He has the ball, and as those guys are coming in, he's trying to pull it up, but he gets his hands separated from the his body and the ball. So when they go to tackle him, he has nothing to do but tuck it in there, and that's all fine and good if you got your son or daughter or your little cousin trying to pull the ball out. You might be able to hang on, but when you've got 400-pound monsters trying to rip it out, different story. So I don't blame him. I don't even blame Grasu. He's a young kid that's stepping right in against a hell of a front four. Those things happen, especially when your starting field position is all well within the 20-yard line. You're going to have bad things happen. But after that, other than being able to move the ball, difficulties moving the ball, the Bears played fairly well on offense. Matt Forte looked good again, looking like the fountain of youth. Jeremy Langford looked good, and Adam Gase's game plan seemed to do well. They moved Jay Cutler. They had him step up in the pocket. They did some interesting formations where they had three backs and a tight end on the field at once. You had Rodgers, Forte, and Langford all on the field. When you have that many injuries and you're that depleted, sure, you can say next man up, but eventually you run out of next man, and you have to just do with what you have. If you don't have any wide receivers, it's not like you can just bring in a guy off the street and have him learn your system in a day and a half. It doesn't really work like that. I think they were hopeful Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal could play, but they didn't. So you have to step up and make do with what you have, and they have inexperienced players at those positions. Granted, they could go out this week and try to get a veteran, but again, you don't know the status of Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal. For the Bears, they made do with what they had. So again, the offensive line, the makeshift offensive line, was able to open up holes for Matt Forte and Jeremy Langford to run behind. They didn't threaten a lot in that first half, but in the second half when they opened up, some good things happened. And you might be asking, why didn't they open it up like that in the first half or earlier in the game? And the reason is the defense kept them in this game. The defense only gave up 10 points. And when the defense gives up 10 points, you feel like you should be in a really good place to win the game. And the Bears offense you already gave up 7 points and you don't want to give up more. So you want to move within with what you have. So you don't want to force anything into these inexperienced receivers and give up an interception or have a quick 3-and-out where you're not running time off the clock. Ultimately, I would imagine they would have liked to have gotten Martellus Bennett more involved, but he didn't have a very good game, and they were covering him well. So if your number one target isn't there and you really don't have any other targets, you start working with what you have. It's running the ball, short passes to receivers, and that's what they did. And you don't want to force, you don't really want to force a lot of things. And then when you have a very conservative head coach, you're not going to force a lot of things down the field and open it up until you really have to. I'm yawning. I don't know what's going on. It's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm ready for bed. That's how you know you're old. But let's move back to the offense a little bit. I want to talk about the defense. This is another just ridiculously injury-depleted group. You traded away Jared Allen. You had Jeremiah Ratliff was banged up, finally came back today after a suspension and injury. You have Eddie Goldman, who got injured during the game but came back. Shea McClellan gets injured in the game with a knee injury. Who knows how long that's going to be. And he was actually starting to play fairly decent in this game. And Alan Ball is injured. And Antrell Roll is injured. You've got an undrafted rookie at one safety position and was a fifth-round draft pick rookie at the other safety position. So you've got a second-year player at one cornerback, a veteran guy that's bounced around the league at the other cornerback, and a low draft pick rookie at one safety and an undrafted rookie at the other safety. And you were able to hold them down pretty well. It wasn't always pretty, and they did make their mistakes, but they held them to 10 points. And on that touchdown, it's probably beating with a dead horse, but Porter, it was a bubble screen, and Porter came up to make the play, and he tried to cut it inside, and it allowed the wide receiver to bounce outside and use the sideline. And that was I expect that out of a young player, but out of a veteran like him, that was a bad play. And he's been playing so much better than that. The play you want to make is you want to be able to block off the sideline and force him inside because you have all of your help on the inside, and you're gonna you're probably going to give up 5-6 yards, but you're not going to give up the touchdown if you force them inside. But if you force them outside, you don't know if you have any safety help over there. You don't know what else you have. If any of the defensive linemen have cut back and made the angle, you don't know what's out there. So it's going to be hope for the best and hope you make the tackle. And he didn't get there. So it was a really bad play by Porter on that touchdown pass by the Chiefs. But other than that, he had a fantastic game. A lot of breakup passes. Good job in covering Jeremy Maclin, who's the only wide receiver that the Chiefs really have. He had some nice plays, but Porter had a lot of nice breakups as well. And it goes to the point of this whole defense is so much better than it has been the last 2 years. So much better. And I had somebody send me an email asking why the defense has been able to make such a big improvement when they haven't really improved the talent. It was actually a point I was going to make is that Vic Fangio has instilled this defense, and you've got the first quarter of the season out of the way. You've got a lot of that learning curve out of the way with the system and the players, and now they're playing within their system, and it's a very good system, and he's got those guys in position, and they're making the plays to the best of their ability. Whereas the last 2 years, I think you had more talent on the team, but there was no discipline, and there was a bad defensive strategy involved, and they got exposed a lot because guys were out of position. There was no teach. It was just very, very bad all around on the coaching staff as well as the players. This team is really well coached, and the only reason that the defense isn't performing even better is right now we're looking at talent gaps, talent deficiency. So if you have a really good system and people playing within that system really well, you're going to be able to make your stops. You're going to be able to do things. You might even come up with a big play or two. Look at the New England Patriots. They don't always have a lot of high-priced talent or really talented guys on that defense, but they make do with what they have, and they make those stops when they have to, and they stop the offense enough to get those wins. And you ask why, and it's because they're very well coached. And that's what's going on with the Bears right now. This is a very well coached team. The difference between an elite defense and what the Bears have, which is a pretty good defense. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to say they have an adequate defense. That's a good word for it. They have an adequate defense that's coming up pretty big. And the difference between that and an elite defense is having elite players. When you are well coached and you're in the places you're supposed to be, you're going to be able to make some plays. You're going to limit big plays. And that's what happens in the NFL. That's why the cover 2 worked for so long, is because as fans we were frustrated because they would give up these underneath routes and teams would move the ball down the field, but then when it got close, they made them kick field goals or got turnovers or whatever it may be. But they never gave up that big play. And that's the key right there, is they didn't give up big plays, and it frustrates teams because NFL teams want to get a big strike in there. They want to move the ball, strike. A lot of offenses aren't very patient. And not only is it the patience issue, but if you force a team to go, if you march down the field in 6 plays, that's not a lot of room for error. But if you make them do 12, 15-yard drives, 20-yard or 20-play drives, whatever it may be, a long number of plays to get down there and score, that's introducing more and more chances for them to make a mistake or you to cause them to make a mistake. The more times you have to carry, if you have one 55-yard run for a touchdown, not much chance of you making a mistake. But if you make them run 18 times to get 55 yards, it's a lot more chance that running back's going to put the ball on the ground. So those two things is teams being too impatient and not taking what they're being given and trying to force things to get them down the field a little faster, and introducing more ways and opportunities for the other team to make a mistake, that's what happens, is they will make mistakes, or you're counting on them to make mistakes. So what happens is when you have a well-coached team is you're doing a similar thing, is they might be able to get these plays, but they're going to have to be playing well. The opposing offense is going to have to play well to get those. You're not going to give them freebies. So if you're going to get beat on a 20-yard pass, it better be a really good throw, because your guy is going to be there. He's going to be where he's supposed to be. The help's going to be there. It better be a good throw. You might get some rushing yards, but again, you're not going to gash somebody for 30, 40 yards. You're not going to have an Adrian Peterson run for 200 yards type game against you when you're well coached. Now, to be an elite defense is you need somebody that transcends, that's going to make those plays. That defense is having a defense that's well coached is going to help you to get to that next level. So you have a guy like a Clay Matthews. He's gonna go out and make that awesome play, rather than the quarterback just getting away from a guy. It's the difference between just missing a sack and getting the sack, or just missing in the interception and getting the interception. This is a game of inches, and when you have that player with the extra added ability and talent, you're going to get those. And that's what the Bears are working for. But that's the reason they also brought in this coaching staff, is because it's going to help them get there. Is the better coached you are, that means you have, when you get these special talents, is he's going to get the most out of them. You have an Eddie Goldman who's looking like he can play, and I mean, you just look at the Bears draft picks. We went through this last week, is how few of the Bears draft picks have made an impact on this team. And you have right now is Kevin White. We got a question mark on him still because he's injured, but he's looked very good in college, and he translates well into the NFL. I think he's going to be a success, but we'll leave a question mark in him. Eddie Goldman so far has looked good and has been a contributor. Hronis Grasu now is going to have to be a contributor because you lost Will Montgomery, your center, for the whole season with a broken leg. So Hronis Grasu has to step up and start to be a contributor, and now he's the starting center. Probably sooner than you expected him to or wanted him to, but that's where you're at. Jeremy Langford, he's already showing his worth right now and his talent. He had a really good game this game. Who else do you have? You have Adrian Amos, who's been your starting safety. That's, what more can you ask for there? So yeah, Kevin White, your first rounder, question mark. So your second, your third, your fourth, and your fifth rounders are all regular contributors, with your second, third, and fifth rounders being starters on the team. Then your seventh or your sixth round pick, Teo Fabaluje, he's a question mark as well, just hasn't had the opportunity. So it's what you're seeing is already better talent evaluation, getting rid of bad contracts and bad draft picks by the former regimes, plural, and bringing in the right coaching staff. And Ryan Pace and Coach Fox and Vic Fangio are really starting to shape what this team is going to look like. They're starting to have an identity. They're a team that's going to be tough up front. They're going to stop the run and force you to beat them with the pass. And sure, it's going to happen, but you're going to have to. You're not going to make mistakes. They're going to have to really make good plays to work the ball down the field. And so far, it's these last couple weeks, it's showed that they're a much improving team. But look for next year them to try to add another pass rusher, another middle linebacker, maybe a safety or a corner. They're going to keep doing things to improve through the draft, through free agency, to improve this team. And with the good coaching staff that you have in place, they're going to keep building and improving. If you can upgrade 2 positions in the offseason from a defense that's playing fairly well, that's just going to make them that much better. And then on the offense, is I feel like you've got the talent. It's just getting everybody healthy. I mean, look at the offensive line you have. You've got, how many guys do you have in place from the last practice of the season? I mean, Jermon Bushrod is hurt. He's out with the concussion. So that's one. You've got Slauson, who's back at left guard position where he belongs. But your center, Will Montgomery, he's out for the season, broke his leg last week. So that's two. And then you have a flip-flop of Kyle Long. He was the right tackle, so he's out of position. That's three. He moved to right. I'm sorry, he was at right guard. He moved to right tackle, so that's another one. And then you had Jordan Mills, who's not even with the team anymore, who was your starting right tackle. He's gone, and now you've got Vlad Dukas, who was a late pickup during training camp, and he's your starting right guard. So it's really, you just have Matt Slauson is the only 1 out of 5 guys that's playing in the position that he was during the last week of practice during training camp. So it's a big shift right here, and you expect Hronis Grasu to have some growing pains and a learning curve. He's more of an athletic guy, and he has a difficult time with some of the bull rushing that you're going to see in the NFL, and he's gonna get there. He started off slow today, and he got better as the game went on, partly because of scheme, partly because once you start seeing people, you can start figuring it out. And then you expect to get Jermon Bushrod back, and hopefully these couple weeks off with the concussion help his back as well. Because if you can get Jermon Bushrod back to where he was a year or two ago, and with Matt Slauson there, and Kyle Long another week or two to figure things out, you just have that right right guard spot that's a weakness, and you start building in the trenches. You get Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal back, and suddenly you're a much improved offense. You've got wide receivers now that have built a little bit of a rapport with Jay Cutler because you've forced them to have to work with him because of injuries. And then you get your star guys back. That's going to force Jay Cutler to develop confidence in these other receivers. I mean, last year he only had confidence in Brandon Marshall, and just every time there was an issue, he forced it to him. Now, if you are comfortable with Martellus Bennett, you're comfortable with Alshon Jeffrey, you're comfortable with Eddie Royal, you're comfortable with Josh Bellamy and Marquise Wilson and Matt Forte, that's 6 guys that you have to cover. That suddenly becomes a lot more important and opens up your offense. So this is a huge win for the Chicago Bears, because it means that the door is not closed on anything for this season. I mean, you're suddenly, with 2 back-to-back wins, you're back into this. I mean, the NFC doesn't have a lot of teams that are shining right now. I mean, at 2-3, the Bears are only a half game out of first place in the NFC East. You're behind Green Bay right now, so you don't expect to win that division. Atlanta's 5-0. Arizona's 3-1 has beat you, but you've got 2 wild card games, and right now Carolina's 4-0, and Minnesota's 2-2. So you're just a half game out of a wild card spot. So that's what winning when you're struggling and have health issues does for you. It keeps you afloat. You weathered the storm through a tough first part of the season. You had some tough games. You went to Seattle with a terrible backup quarterback. You had to play Green Bay, and you played Arizona, who's just one of the better teams in the NFC. It's a rough first half of the season. Then you play the Chiefs, who are getting healthier, and they're a good team as well. And Oakland is an upstart. So of your first 5 games, there's no slouches in there, and you were able to come up with 2 wins. And for a team that a lot of national media outlets said was going to be the worst team in football, this is a big coup. And I'm not saying that the Bears are a playoff team, and I'm not saying that we should suddenly considered as a good team. I'm just saying is that when the chips are down and you've got a lot of injuries and the talent deficit with the good teams is pretty significant, is what they're able to do right now and what they're doing is pretty significant, and it's pretty awesome. They're not winning pretty and they're not winning big, but they're also not the Lions either, who benched Matt Stafford today. So that tells you something. And it tells you, too, that we finally got a system in there that Jay Cutler is performing in. He may not be putting up these gaudy numbers, but he's not making mistakes and he's moving the ball down the field. And we see this vast, significant difference of when Jimmy Clausen is in versus Jay Cutler. It's a nice game for the Chicago Bears. And then next week they have Detroit, which is just a team in disaster mode. And you figure they're benching Matt Stafford right now. If they lose this game, it's probably, you have to figure that a lot of people are going to quit and try not to get injured and just not play for this team, that you should be able to go to Detroit and get that win. And it suddenly puts you at 3-3, and with going into the bye week. So you go 3-3 in the bye week. You're starting November with getting guys healthy again. It's another 2 weeks for Alshon Jeffrey, another 2 weeks for Eddie Royal, another 2 weeks for Jermon Bushrod. We'll wait and see what's happening with Shea McClellan. And speaking of Shea McClellan, I think he's actually figuring this middle linebacking thing out. And he's not good, but he's getting better. He's calling the plays well. He's making the right calls and he's calling the plays. It's just that he's not talented enough to be a game changer at middle linebacker, but he's figuring it out. And with that injury, you have Christian Jones stepping up and being the play caller from the middle linebacking spot, and he had probably his best game of the season this week. And so I wonder if it's partly that when they have that responsibility and they're the play caller and they feel like the coaches is trusting them and the rest of their teammates are trusting them, that it all starts to click for them, and then they try to play better. And because it seems like the defensive line, they were great against the run for the most part. You had Jamal Charles get some big runs, and he had that one giant run, but that was bullshit anyway, because if you go back and watch, Eddie Goldman got just horse tackled. They grabbed him by his neck and threw him down, and it was complete holding, and they didn't call it. Probably because if you look from the other play where you could see the referee, right where it happened was the running back was running by. So I don't know if it obscured his view so he couldn't see it, but it should have been a holding call. So I don't attribute that one. Overall, they did a pretty good job of stopping the run, because that's what Kansas City does. And Jamal Charles is an incredible running back. I mean, look at his average. He's over 5 yards a carry for his career. So once they knocked him out of the game, well, once the turf knocked him out of the game, it was the Bears were able to pin their ears back. And they're still not getting to the quarterback like you would hope they would. This is an offensive line that has struggled mightily this whole season, and suddenly they look pretty decent against the Bears. That's a little frustrating. Is this defense is still not generating the pass rush that you want them to, but you're getting coverage sacks because your defensive backs are playing well and you're stopping the run. So if you can do those things, you can live a little bit with that not getting the pass rush. I mean, it's not going to be for long because the good teams are going to pick you apart eventually. But as you're figuring things out and developing who's going to be in there and who's the guys that can rush the passer, then you can at least live with limiting big plays and stopping the run. What else can I say about the Bears? Hopefully wins like this build up a confidence in the team. Going 0-5 Look what happens with the Lions. I don't think the Bears and the Lions are vastly different in terms of their makeup and their talent level. But the Lions didn't get any wins in there. I mean, even though the Bears eked one out against, today against the Chiefs, and they eked one out against Oakland Raiders, you have the Lions didn't eke anything out, and they look like they're ready to quit. And they lose today. I wouldn't be surprised if that team just quits on everybody and coaches have to start being fired, because this is just absolutely terrible. And that's the difference, is you get a big win in there and you get your team fired up and you do some good things and you see signs of improvement. The signs of improvement is always the biggie. Your defense, you're figuring out who the starters are. You're learning the system. It's becoming more clear. You're making some plays to stop defenses or offenses. Looks good. When you're an offense and you're still able to move the ball, even if you're not putting up points, you're able to move the ball with all the injuries you have. I mean, Bushrod injured, Alshon injured. I forgot Teofat Bluejay's injured. Kyle Long's got a questionable back. And, I mean, you just get so many injuries after injuries after injuries that when you're able to move the ball, that builds confidence in your team. And when you get those wins, suddenly, I mean, this league is not the difference between the worst team and the best team can be switched so quickly just on a couple of plays with a couple of players. And when you feel like you can win, it develops a team that fosters winning and fosters good play. With the Bears, winning is contagious and winning is good medicine. But let's not all wax positively on the Bears. Let's focus on some of the negative things too, because I want to be a little bit fair and balanced and show some non-homerness. Regardless that there's backups in there, the offensive line is going to need to get better. They are allowing too much pressure, and Jay's having to scramble a lot. And Jay, as good as he's been, he's not throwing interceptions. He's underthrowing or overthrowing to the point where nobody can get it, which is better than throwing interceptions or forcing things. But on some of those throws, he's got to be able to make it catchable for at least his guy. Too many bouncing passes. I feel like he's more in sync with the wide receivers. That's good. The offensive line's opening up holes. The defense is just slow. That's the biggest problem you have is there's not a lot of speed. So you're not getting your defensive backs to break up some of the plays because they don't have the speed. Speed is a huge factor in the NFL. And you've got guys that know where they're supposed to be, but may not be able to be athletic or fast enough to get there, to make the play. And that's something that Ryan Pace is definitely trying to improve, getting younger, getting faster. And it's part of the reason that they're not getting these sacks is you've got guys that are not explosive enough to be able to beat you on the edge, which means that you're not keeping them on their heels. And here's what happens is this is how you consistently beat an offensive lineman without, on a one-on-one, is if you can beat him around the edge on speed, the guy is going to set up. It's going to be in the back of his mind that I can't stop you from that speed move. So he's going to try to cheat and be ready for that speed move, and he's going to be on his heels ready to fire backwards. Because coming out of that 3-point stance, if you've never done it, try to do it. If there's very few guys that just have that explosion of being able to pop back into their position and be able to maintain. Watch the drills and during the combine and things like that of these prospects, and they just look super awkward and super slow while they're doing it. It's because you're a big guy and trying to do these things is a little bit. You look silly. You look unathletic. And if you have a defensive end or an outside linebacker who can get around that corner like lightning, then that offensive lineman, he's either going to need help by chipping guy. And what happens is if you chip, you're just basically sending your tight end or somebody that's going to go out to do the rest of their play. They're just going to kind of bump him to make him alter his route a little bit and allow your offensive lineman to get into position. Or that offensive lineman's going to have to cheat a little bit, like I said, and he's not going to have time to fire back, so he's going to be ready to go right there, and he's going to have it be on his heels. And then when he steps back, so once you've got that guy on his heels, your battle is half done. Is once he steps backwards and he's already on his heels, that's when you fire inside, do a swim move, and you beat him inside, or just bull rush and power him because he's going to be on his heels and you can power through him. And that's the way you win, is you keep the guy off balance, but you need multiple moves to be able to do it. You need that outside speed rush. You need the power to be able to push him backwards, and you need a good swim move and be able to keep the offensive lineman's hands off of you. Because if he gets his hands inside of you, even with that speed move, he's going to be able to get into you. So you need to be able to hand fight, get him off. And the Bears just don't have a guy that can beat you with speed. That's where I was going with this. Sorry. I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent. But when the Bears don't have a lot of guys that can beat you with a speed move, is they're relying on these other moves to try to get in. And if the offensive lineman, if he is not worried about getting beat by speed, he's going to stay in, and you're going to lose effectiveness on those swim moves. He's going to be able to get his hands on you. You're going to have to rely on a lot of tricks like stunts and things like that, and trickery. So that's where partly where the Bears are lacking, is because they don't have anybody that's just a speed rush guy that can get in there, and that's going to cause all kinds of havoc. Is you can play straight up against the guy and not have to worry about him being with speed. So the Bears defense is really sorely lacking in speed, and that's going to catch up to them, and that's going to be the downfall of when they clearly they're not going to make the playoffs. It's going to be because partly because of injuries, partly because they're lacking in talent and speed. So I did want to get through some of those negatives. But overall, this was a great win. Any win you get in the NFL is a great win, and when you're able to do it on the road and you're able to come back and score 2 late touchdowns with injury depleted offense, that's always a positive. So we will get back to you. We might do a show later in the week to kind of wrap up some of the injuries and some of the other things going on, but. For the time being, we're going to sort of wrap up the Bears for now, and the next week they're in Detroit, and that should be a good game. Hopefully, they can get another win. So let's move on to our Cubs. Since our last episode, we had the Cubs. Arrieta went on the mound, and like we expected, went through and shut down a really, really good Pittsburgh Pirate team. He didn't even have that good of a night. For Jake Arrieta, it wasn't one of his just magical nights. He had some control issues. He beamed a couple of guys. It looked like he had trouble getting a good grip on the ball, like it was slick or something. I don't know if it was humid there or if it was moisture and it was like humid or damp. I don't know what it was, but it looked like he had a little bit of trouble gripping the ball. And nothing terrible, but he allowed a couple more base runners than he usually has. He beamed a couple guys, got into some holes in the pitch count. But overall, he went through and did what he expected him to do, and what you pay him to do is he went out there and he beat probably one of the best teams in baseball in their own park. And there was some interesting things in there, as you had the bench clearing almost brawl, the hug off, Sean Martinez, who wanted to fight everybody, including the Gatorade jug. But it came down to the fact that the Pirates have a really good team, but they don't have that ace. They don't have anybody to combat when they face a Madison Bumgarner or a Jake Arrieta. It's when they get in, so they have to do this they're going to have to proceed by playing better all season long and getting past that wild card spot and getting the division win, because they can't stack up when a team has got like a super ace. Because Garrett Cole has been great all season, and he didn't have a terrible game. He just had 2 bad pitches that went out of the park. It was basically 2 guys that beat him, and lo and behold, there you go. You're sitting at home watching the Cubs play the St. Louis Cardinals. And like I mentioned every week for the past several weeks, is it's starting to play out where this having to play the 1-game play-in game is affecting what you do as the Cubs. You have Jake Arrieta pitching in the wild card, so he's only able to pitch 1 game in this National League Division Series against the Cardinals, because it's a best of 5. And the way that these games are structured is the first game was 2 days after. So Wednesday was where he pitched, and Friday was the other game. So you're not going to have Arrieta pitch on 1 day rest. The second game was the day after that, so you're not going to have Arrieta pitch on 2 days rest. So he pitches game 3, which is going to put him at 5 days rest right there. So it's a regular start for him. But then you're not going to be able to pitch him in games 4 or 5. So Arrieta gets 1 start, whereas in a best, where you only need 3 wins in the series, if you're able to get Arrieta in there twice, that really, really, really puts St. Louis Cardinals in a bad spot. Because, if you could have trusted Lester enough to start him on that wild card game against the Pirates and got the win, imagine having Arrieta in that first game against the Cardinals. You have to assume, you have much better shot of winning. If you would have got that win and Hendricks win the next day, suddenly you have to win 1 out of the next 3. But it is the way it is, and you have to put Arrieta out there in that 1-game do or die kind of series against the Pirates, because there's no going back after that. You need that win. So you go on and you're paying Lester this ton of money, and I thought he pitched really well. He had basically a couple of bad pitches and he gave up. I mean, they technically 3 earned runs, but one of them was attributed to, or 1 or 2 of them were attributed to him that somebody else pitched. So that chalked that up to the bullpen. But really, Lester had a very good game against a team that's been able to hit him well and run bases on him well. So Lester, I thought, pitched exactly how you wanted him to pitch. It was the Cubs' offense that really screwed the pooch on that game. Is nobody could hit. Nobody was getting on base. I mean, you're making the Cardinals pitchers look like they're trotting out Bob Gibson and Christy Mathewson. It's just really ridiculous how the Cubs' bats just went silent. So chalk it up to the Cardinals. Is they've been there before, and they had some big time hitting, and their pitchers came up big, and they won that first game. But then game 2 is you don't have. Typically, the Cubs have done really well this year after coming out after a loss, because they've thrown Arrieta on the mound, and you don't have Arrieta to throw out in game 2. You're throwing Kyle Hendricks out there, who's been Jekyll and Hyde for the Cubs. He's looked, last year he looked great. Parts of the year he looked great. And part of the season he just looked dreadful. You throw him out there and he just throws a gem. It's, it was a short gem, but in there he looked good until he gave up those 2 home runs, and they pulled him out. But you have the Cubs were doing Cub type things and getting that win. Kyle Hendricks and Addison Russell laid down squeeze bunts. Jorge Soler came out big time and got that home run, and you got that 5-run inning, and that basically won you the game. The Cubs, we've said it before, is they're towards the bottom of baseball as far as batting average, but where they're able to do their damage is they have timely hitting. They get a lot of guys on base because they have high on base percentage. They work the counts typically and see a lot of pitches and force the starting pitcher to waste a lot of pitches and get taken out of the game because they're running 100 plus pitches in the 5th, 6th innings. And that's just basically what the Cubs did, is they worked the counts and they got guys on. They capitalized on their speed, got a home run, and they rode that out with good pitching. Greichuk and Colton Wong hit back-to-back home runs, but they were solo shots, and you send the bullpen in there to lock that game down. Where the Cubs really, really struggled in that first game was swinging on early counts, swinging on first pitches, swinging on second pitches, popping up, and just not working that count, not doing Cub things, not getting on base, not working the count, not laying off bad pitches, making the pitcher have to work for it. And you add that into an umpire that was being very generous with the outside corner. So things that I think typically would have been a ball, they were getting strikes. So Cubs batters weren't swinging at them, and they were getting called strikes. But they weren't working the count like they normally do, and it allows the starter to stay in for a long time. And when you have a starter that's just throwing up goose eggs and has a perfect game through 6 innings, 5 innings, you got to get that guy out of the game. Try to work the middle relief, because what are the odds that you get, if you get a starter out of the game early, what are the odds that you're going to have 2 middle relievers plus a setup man and a closer that are going to throw lights out as well on the same night? It doesn't happen that often. So you got to play your odds, and if you're not hitting a pitcher, work the count and try to get 6, 7 count or pitch count at bats and get them out of the game. I mean, if you can go 1, 2, 3, but if the first 3 guys have 8 pitches on either at bat, so that's 24 pitches in the first inning. You knock the guy out, even if he doesn't give up a run, by 4 or 5 innings. And that's what the Cubs try to do. So now you have Game 3 coming back to Chicago, and it's what it is the way it works is for the first round is 2-1-1-1. So you're gonna have Game 3 in Chicago, and you're gonna be in Chicago, and you're gonna have Jake Arrieta on the mound, pitching on a full 5 days rest. And that's, if the Cubs can squeeze out a couple of runs. I mean, the Cardinals rely on a lot of home runs and a lot of big hits, and I don't see Arrieta giving up those home runs or big time hits to these guys. And they might get a couple of base hits, but I don't see this Cardinals offense really scoring a lot of runs on Arrieta. So if the Cubs can bang out 2-3 runs, I think that might be enough to win this game. So if you have Arrieta pitching in Chicago, there's a good chance that the Cubs go back to St. Louis with a 2-1 win or a 2-1 lead in a best-of-5 series. Options are, what do you do if you're Joe Madden? Who do you pitch for that Game 4? Assuming that Jake Arrieta comes out there and gets this win, and you go down there for a potential series, you go down to St. Louis in their ballpark for a potential series clinching game, do you start your next guy in your rotation, which is Jason Hamill, who has, again, had a great first half of the season, had a great last year, but had a great first half of the season, but he struggled in the second half. Or do you go with John Lester with 3 days rest? That's a tough one for me. I would probably go with Jason Hamill, because if you start John Lester in this game, what do you do for Game 5? 'Cause you lose that game, you're down. They beat your ace twice, and a series is 2-2 in a best-of-5, and you're coming back to Chicago. Then you're going to have to go to a clinching game, putting all kinds of pressure on Jason Hamill, or are you going to do a bullpen start where you're going to do matchup and give everybody an inning? Bullpen starts scary. I would say I would probably start Jason Hamill because you don't know what you're going to get with Lester on a short rest. Give Jason Hamill, who's been rested, get him the start, give him the quick hook. If he gets himself in trouble, pull him out, and then work from there. Do your bullpen start that way because he's going to have no pressure. He's on the road. It's a clinching game, but it's not the last game of the series. And if it all comes down to it, and you need a game 5, you come back to Chicago where you have John Lester pitching there on a full 5 days rest. I think that's the better way to go. But hopefully you can get the win in that 4th game. You get Arrieta the win game 3 and Hamill the win in game 4 and lock that up, because then you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off. You have 3 days off, and then you're able to reset your rotation again, and you can start Arrieta game 1 against the winner of the Mets Dodgers series, and then John Lester game 2, and bam bam bam, be ready to go back there, and those guys can pitch on short days rest if need be to get to the World Series. So it's what you could do as well is you could put Hamill out there, and if he goes short, you could put John Lester in there in short notice as a middle reliever. I mean, he's going to be there. I don't play the trump card unless I have to. But I don't know. That's why Joe Madden is Joe Madden, and he gets paid the big bucks, and he gets all the respect and all of that, because he seems to know how to make those right choices. And I'm not going to lie, I was watching the Cubs game, and once Hendricks gave up those 2 home runs, I just got this queasy feeling in my stomach. I pressed record, and I went upstairs, and I played with my baby daughter because I couldn't take the pressure. A lot of people enjoy watching sports, and I don't. I'm a guy that gets ridiculous anxiety when it's a high-pressure game. If it's a regular season game, it's just fun, win or lose. I like watching it. But when it's a high-pressure situation, like the Cubs being the playoffs and against the Cardinals, and it's a game that they basically almost a must-win, it's too nerve-wracking for me. And I went back and watched the game, and it was fun to watch after that when you know that they won, but it was way too nerve-wracking for me. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think about that. Is how are you when you're watching these pressured games, like the Stanley Cup Finals, and when they're going into overtime, and playoff baseball, and games like that where it's there's these important games, and just they're too close for comfort. How do you guys deal with it? So hit me up on Twitter at Swerski Sports, or Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, or our website at SwerskiSports.com. Any one of those, hit us up and let us know how you deal with these pressure games. Last things I want to talk about the Cubs are, you've got Rizzo and Bryant who are struggling to hit the ball, and the Cubs offense as a whole is struggling a little bit. The only one, Schwarber, didn't hit the ball well against the Pirates, and you had Soler, who came through with a home run. Addison Russell swinging the bat well, not always getting a lot of hits, but he's swinging the bat well. I think if you're Joe Madden, you've got so many options on this team. You do have Austin Jackson, you do have Chris Coughlin, you do have Kyle Schwarber, you do have Jorge Soler. You have so many players that you can plug in there that you're not locked into one guy, and these aren't like superstars per se, where you can't bench a superstar. If Mike Trout is struggling at the plate and you're the Angels, you can't bench him because he's your guy. But the Cubs have so many guys that have been the guy this season. At time to time, Schwarber's been the guy, Soler's been the guy, Coughlin's been the guy, Rizzo's been the guy, Castro's been the guy, Bryant's been the guy. There's been so many guys that have been the guy for them this season that it's okay if you want to switch it up. I mean, you don't have to keep them out the whole game. You can rotate them in. You've got that that flexibility. And Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo are struggling right now. And you're not going to sit Anthony Rizzo because he's been the guy that's been the guy for you the most. He's been the most steady guy you've had. He's also got the most power on the team, I think. Well, then might be Schwarber, but he's a pretty consistent guy. You feel like he's got more of the tools to help him work through a slump than Chris Bryant, who may eventually be more talented, but it takes time to be able to work out those slumps. That's the difference between a veteran and a rookie, is when everybody's going to go through a slump, it's the process that you go through to work through that slump. And when you're a young guy, you don't have all the tools in your arsenal to get through those slumps sometimes. Where Rizzo has gone through and taken those lumps, and he knows better how to work through those slumps, and Bryant's really struggling. So if the way that he's staying in the lineup is he's been making some brilliant plays at third base that saved the Cubs and really helped them out a lot. I mean, he made some great plays against the Pirates. So you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable enough with somebody's defense to sit Bryant and spell him? And it worked for Castro. As you sat Castro, he came back and he got his head on straight and got his attitude corrected and had time to reflect on what he was doing and why he wasn't hitting, and came back, and second half, since his benching has been phenomenal. And you need to do something to get Bryant back in the thick of things. And I don't know if it's the pressure of playoff baseball, or if it's been a really long season and he's not used to playing that much. He's struggling, and it's something you're going to have to work on. And Joe Madden, he's going to have to do that. Other than that, I think the Cubs pitching is good enough to be able to win in the postseason. It's going to be whether or not their offense can come alive enough, and they're going to have to be able to manufacture runs, is what they did yesterday against the Cardinals. Is they manufactured runs. You had Hendricks with a squeeze bunt, and Addison Russell with a squeeze bunt, and you're going to have to be able to manufacture runs however you get them. You're not going to be able to leave a lot of guys on base. You're going to have to work through those kind of things, and that's what you're going to have to do when you're the Cubs. But they've set themselves up in a good spot. Is they're 1-1 going back to Chicago, so it's in the best of three. Now it comes down, it's a best of 3 series, and 2 out of 3 games are going to be in Chicago, and you've got Arrieta pitching one of those. So you like to think that it's you've only got to win 1 out of 2, and one of them is going to be in Chicago, and you're going to have John Lester for one of those games. So it's I think the chances of the Cubs moving on past the Cardinals are pretty good. But again, that's a veteran team. They know how to win. They've shown they can win, where the Cubs are a young team. So anything's possible, but I do like the Cubs' chances at this point. So finally, we're going to move on to one more topic, and that is the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks have played 3 games so far, and this is a rough stretch right in the beginning of the season for them, because they played 3 games in 4 nights, which is traveling between New York and Chicago. It's tough. It's a lot of miles, and it's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of games to play that quickly, but you get and you face in the first 3 games 2 really good teams. You get the Islanders twice, one in their home opener in Brooklyn, and then you get the Rangers, who are a team that was in the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years ago, and were a good team last year. So you get 2 really good teams right off the bat, and they struggled a little bit with their defense with the Rangers, and they gave up some goals that they probably shouldn't have given up. And I think part of it was, you saw a little bit of rust on Corey Crawford, and part of it was they weren't settled on their defensive pairings. If you think about it, is TVR is just coming back from an injury. Victor Svedberg is not that good. Trevor Daley's new to this team. You're changing up pairings. You've got Last game, you had Hjalmarsson with Keith and Svedberg with Seabrook and Van Riemsdyk versus with Daly. Your defensive pairings are still a little bit of a mismatch, and you've got a lot of new guys that are still learning this Quenneville system. The first game was a little bit rusty, and like I said, Crawford didn't look fantastic. You're going to get what you're going to get. But on offense, it looks like all the systems go is you've got Tavo that looks good. Kane is coming back and wants to beat the world by himself. Jonathan Taves is Jonathan Taves. Marian Hossa is Marian Hossa. Then you've got this Artemi Panarin, and he's like, if you're not familiar with him, he came over here. He's a young kid. A lot of teams wanted to sign him. He came to the Blackhawks, and he played in the KHL, the Russian version of the NHL. He played in the KHL last year, and he was on the same team as Ilya Kovalchuk. If you don't remember him, he was one of the stars of the NHL several years ago, and right in the prime of his career decided that he wanted to play in his homeland of Russia, and he got similar money, and he would rather go and play in Russia. So in the middle of a contract, he just walked out and went to Russia, and he's a superstar over there. And Artemi Panarin was on his team and was the better player on his team by leaps and bounds per everyone that saw him. I don't watch a lot of KHL, unfortunately, but he looked much better, and he comes over here and he had an upper body injury, so you didn't get to see him in the training camp, but he comes right in and just looks like you may remember when Tavo first came up, and if you watched a lot of Rockford Ice Hogs games, Tavo struggled a little bit trying to figure out the difference between the European game and the American game and the different size of the ice and figuring out where he's supposed to be. And once he figured it out, it was kind of like a light switch went on, and you saw what you expected to see, and it just took him a little bit. But Panarin, you're not getting that learning curve. He's stepping right in like he's completely comfortable and knows how to play. And there was one point where the winning goal last night, and or not the winning goal, 2 nights ago, the winning goal. It's all just running together with so many games between the Bears and playoff baseball and hockey, and so many games in a couple of nights. But there was one play where Kaner scored, and him and Panarin just looked like they were playing catch with each other. It would just look like they were toying with the other team, and it's almost unfair. So you've got the Blackhawks offense is just looking really good. You've got your fourth line is your grinder line. It's a line I really like. Garbutt's a hustler. Marcus Kruger, you know what you have. You love Marcus Kruger, and Andrew Desjardins is another guy who's a hustler. You love how hard he works, and that fourth line is trouble for any team, because they're going to go out there and they're going to play hard and make you work for it. Your third line is the one that's going to have to improve. You've got Shaw at center, Victor Tikhonov at one wing, at the right wing, and you've got Bickle at left wing. And Bickle's got a lot to prove. Like we've said before, he got put on waivers. He can go be sent down to Rockford at any point, and you could bring Marco Dano up. It's not like you don't have talent that you can scratch Brian Bickle, or you can't send him down to Rockford. So that's not the issue. So that third line is going to have to really work to earn their minutes on the ice. Is Shaw, you know what you're going to get, but Tikhonov, I'm going to see a little more from him, and Bickle, got to see more from him. Your second line is fantastic with Anisimov, Panarin, and Patrick Kane. That on a lot of teams could be the first line, and it's your second line in the Blackhawks. So they can throw out of that first line Tavo Teravainen and Marian Hossa, and then come right back with Anisimov, Panarin, and Patrick Kane. And it almost seems unfair because, when you get down to 3-on-3 hockey in overtime, you put any two of the top six from the Blackhawks along with Duncan Keith, and there's a good chances you're gonna win that game. Crawford looked a little rusty to start. You had the last game, Scott Darling came in there and played well. But this team doesn't look like, for the most part, it's shaking off any rust. Passes look pretty smooth. It was just some defensive gaffes that gave up some goals for the Blackhawks, and those are things that you're going to work through. I'm suspecting that the Blackhawks are going to be watching to either trade for a veteran defenseman or see if there's anybody on the streets, because I can't imagine that they're going to want to stick with Victor Svedberg for that long. And I don't think that that's just not what they want to do. They're probably going to want to put Seabrook and Keith back together, pair Hjalmarsson with another veteran defenseman, and then maybe keep Van Riemsdyk and Trevor Daley together. But I don't think the Blackhawks are done making moves. I expect them to bring in a veteran, depending on how long Michael Roosevelt is out. Roosevelt, I expect him to be out a little bit, but until that time, I expect the Blackhawks to at least test the waters to see what's out. It's nice to see what the Blackhawks can do going on the road and playing some tough playoff level teams, and it's good to see that they haven't lost a step, even though that they had a long playoff season and a short off season, and they had it's a tumultuous off season with the salary cap and having to dump guys like Sharp and Oduya and Brandon Saad. To see that they're coming back and showing that they can play within the system and still play well, and that they still have a lot of talent down in Rockford that they can bring up. That's about it. I don't have much else to say. Is where maybe next week or the week after we'll get into more Bulls talk. Once the Cubs win the World Series, because you got to believe, we'll do a baseball wrap up the White Sox Cubs, and kind of talk about what they might do in the off season as an introductory, before we get into hot stove in a couple of months, and then we'll get deeper into football because we're almost at the bye week. But that's gonna be it. If you're not familiar with the show, I probably should have done this earlier. This is a By the Fans for the Fans show. We, unlike Boers and Bernstein and a lot of shows that are on our AM stations, our AM sports stations, is where they just totally love to just crap all over their fans and make them treat them like they're garbage and like they're the golden gods. It's silly. It's sports. None of us are experts because none of us are GMs or coaches or anything like that. We're all people that became knowledgeable by watching the game, and some of us have different views and insights than others. I think we all have a pretty valid point of view for the most part. So unlike those guys, if you have something you want to say, go ahead and say it. If you want to be on the air, send me an email. I'll even have you on the show. Who cares? I get tired of hearing my own voice. But if you want your question read, send a tweet at swerskisports.com. You can send something on Facebook, facebook.com/Swerski Sports, or the website swerskisports.com. And Swerski Sports is spelled SWERSKI Sports. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure you share this with your friends. However you guys are listening, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, make sure you're subscribing, and leave comments, give 5-star reviews, anything that could help the show grow, because that's makes me feel good the more people I'm talking to. But thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her, she's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the bears go bearing down.